Hey, I'm Maluka, a 3D pen creator, and today I got a new pen. My last one was really bad and I had to replace it with this one. It's the first time I've seen a USB-C on a 3D pen. Today I'll be making a camera. I announced I'll be making a few paper crafts in my last video because it will be easier, and well, this wasn't anything but. This one was definitely marked as hard, but I severely underestimated the skills required to make paper crafts, and this template was not in English. To begin, I need to make the first 3 pieces, which once put together will make the body of the camera. Using only one layer of filament will make the body very weak, so I went and added another layer. This is a mandatory step required for most 3D pen crafts. Time to remove it? It's not coming off, and that's because I accidentally used the wrong side. Moving on to the next piece, and yes, I did have to make the other part again. It was the exact same steps as the first one. I decided to pick the camera because I wanted a challenge, but my eco was very big. This wasn't necessarily a difficult thing if you made it with paper, but I realized making it with a 3D pen, a lot of the parts are redundant and you save a lot of time freehanding them instead of following the template. Now that the first set of parts are done, it's time to smooth them. I used a soldering iron on a lower temp to keep the shape of the parts. Then, to fill in any of the gaps, I just used some extra filament. I used a torch to heat the filament because it's time to assemble the body of the camera. I used a little bit of filament to test the parts before I permanently put them together. And yeah, it doesn't fit at all. This is because filament isn't paper and you can't bend it at will. Obviously, what was I thinking? The new plan is to assemble the parts onto the camera bottom to guarantee they fit, and this did end up working. For the bottom of the camera, I added an extra piece of filament to cover the grill. Then I melted and bent the sides. Once that was done, I connected it to the bottom. It's looking good, but it's time for the rest of the parts. Next up are the buttons that sit on top of the camera. I also want to point out that none of the parts were in order. Part 5 could be on page 1 and part 6 could be on page 5. Bending all the parts together was very fun. It was like a little puzzle. I did have to improvise a lot of these parts because some of them just didn't fit, so the camera isn't 100% as accurate as the paper craft, but I don't think it's not recognizable. I said this before, but I'm not trying to get perfection. I'm just trying to improve my 3D pen skills, and every project is a new experience, and I learned a lot with this one. This piece still confused me. I have no clue how it was actually supposed to fit, and the next time you see it, it will be way smaller. Thing with this piece, I was very confused on how to bend it, but I did eventually figure it out. Moving on. I connected the top parts with filament and smoothed it out using my soldering tool. I realized I probably should have added at least 2 more layers of filament because it became way too soft in some places and caved in a bit. Back to this piece, and this is how it's supposed to look. And I cut off another bit of acrylic and added it to the back lens, which did not get covered up. This is the part I showed you before, and you can see how much smaller it is. It was also at this point that I completely gave up on a paper craft and decided to freehand. I still used the parts that I made, but differently. For instance, this part was a completely different piece I just didn't make and used scrap filament. Same for the bottom, those pieces were originally meant for a different part. Now it's time to prepare the back lens, and those little tabs on the papercraft are completely pointless if you are using a 3D pen, for future warning. I also should have waited to add the acrylic because the circle ended up being too big and there was no way to fix it without remaking it. Now I add the buttons I don't really know the names of, and I actually record all my videos on my iPhone and edit them on my iPad, so this is technically my first camera. I lightly scored this part of the knob to make it more realistic. My only reference was a couple of photos of the camera I found online. This will be linked in the description if anyone else wants to take a gamble. Going back to the photos to see what I was missing took the majority of the time making this camera. It has a ton of details and I wanted it to be realistic, at least from afar. I went ahead and fixed up these lines and freehanded the rest of the buttons and added anything I missed. Now for the lens, my favorite part of this project just because I knew it would look the coolest. I heated up the main lens part with a lighter and melted it into a circle. The first lens was connected to this part, and of course I made another side part to keep the 3D look. I then added all the parts in order until the lens was complete. This honestly surpassed my expectations. Now it's time to sand. I started with the diamond bit because this project has small areas. If this project is larger, you can just use the sanding gun. The bit or the drum, like all sanding tools, leaves a little bit of texture behind, so I sand again to get rid of it. I'm sanding really hard, as you can see. The final step before I put everything together is melting off the sanding dust with a lighter. The camera is assembled. Now I have to clean this up. I sprayed the camera with primer filler and sanded it, but I accidentally forgot to press record. Now it's time to paint, and it's just black paint with some thinner so it doesn't go on too thick. I love when the things I make end up being simple colors. It's impossible to mess up. For everything white, I ended up using a paint pen because there's no way I could use a paintbrush. This paint pen really disappointed me. It was not as fine as I thought it would be, and I had to redo the lettering multiple times. Then I thought the camera doesn't look very camera-y, so I ended up adding a bunch of lines and a bunch of stuff that I thought a camera would have on it. Then it was time for red, which wasn't much, so I added a random line. I cleaned it up a bit and the camera was done. The lettering could have been better, but I like it.